Okay, let's jump right into this explainer. Today, we're heading to a Scottish location that perfectly bridges wild, untamed romance with absolutely vital modern engineering. We're talking about Loch Katrine. It's a stunning 13-kilometer-long freshwater loch hidden deep inside the Loch Lomond and the Trossachs National Park. It's literally a place where history, classic literature, and just sheer natural beauty all collide into something truly spectacular. But to really get why this place matters so much, we have to start with a kind of wild question. Did one rogue outlaw and a single epic poem actually invent modern tourism? I know it sounds like a massive stretch, right? But as we unpack the story of this seemingly quiet stretch of water over in the Stirling district, you're going to see exactly how a global travel boom kicked off right here on these very shores. So, here's our roadmap for this explainer. We're going to cover the birthplace of tourism, an engineering marvel, key attractions and sites, optimal travel itineraries, and finally, accessibility and hidden challenges. All right, let's dive straight into Section 1, the birthplace of tourism, myths, outlaws, and poetry. Now, it's fascinating how a few key historical anchors completely transformed this landscape. It all started way back in 1671, when the legendary Scottish outlaw and folk hero Rob Roy MacGregor was actually born at Glengyle, right at the western head of the loch. Then, jump to 1810, and Sir Walter Scott drops his blockbuster poem, The Lady of the Lake. Fast forward to 1859, and the whole vibe shifts when Queen Victoria shows up to open a massive infrastructure project. And by 1900, the steamship Sir Walter Scott officially launches, which pretty much cemented the loch as a premier, must-see travel destination. And you know, the romance of this place didn't just pull in your average sightseers. It absolutely captured the imaginations of some of the world's most famous writers and artists. We're talking heavy hitters like William Wordsworth and John Keats, who were completely drawn in by these dramatic vistas. It actually sparked this massive Highland cultural revival. The paintings and the writings that came out of this exact spot literally defined the visual and cultural identity of the Scottish Highlands that we still hold onto today. But honestly, it was Sir Walter Scott's incredibly vivid descriptions in 1810 that really poured fuel on the fire. His storytelling was so powerful that Victorian tourists just started flocking to Loch Katrine in absolute droves. It got so overwhelming so fast that local landowners like Lady Drummond literally had to scramble to build these rustic wicker huts with bracken roofs just to give all these sudden crowds a place to shelter from the wild Scottish weather. Moving on to Section 2, an engineering marvel, sustaining a modern city. You really have to wrap your head around the sheer scale of this place. Plunging to depths of up to 153 meters, that's roughly 500 feet, Loch Katrine is actually the sixth deepest loch in all of Scotland. And because the surface sits about 116 meters above sea level, its deepest floor physically drops way below sea level. This massive basin gives it the capacity to hold an unbelievable 64.6 million liters of extremely high-quality fresh water. And that brings us to the absolute genius of Victorian engineering. Ever since 1859, this loch has been the primary water reservoir for the entire city of Glasgow and the surrounding areas. But here is the truly mind-blowing part. It transports all of that water through a 26-mile underground aqueduct all the way to the city using nothing but pure gravity. That's right. Zero modern pumps. None. It's an absolute masterpiece of infrastructure that's still working flawlessly today. Now, because this is pristine public drinking water managed by Scottish Water, there are some very strict modern rules in place to keep it that way. For starters, private fossil-fueled petrol engines are totally banned on the water. No exceptions. You also can't fish from the banks at all. If you want to fly fish for wild brown trout, you have to rent a specialized, eco-friendly or electric boat. Even if you want to swim, you have to stick to designated zones and use bright tow floats so you don't get in the way of the active cruise routes. Okay, let's get into Section 3, key attractions and sites. Exploring the loch. So the absolute classic way to experience this water is from the deck of a ship, totally free from the noise and smell of outboard engines. It's incredible. You can literally step back in time on the steamship Sir Walter Scott, which has been cruising these exact waters since 1900, giving you a real, authentic Victorian-era experience. Or, if you prefer something a bit newer, the modern Lady of the Lake vessel runs these really comfortable daily sightseeing excursions. When you're planning a trip, it helps to understand how the loch is laid out, with its twin hubs, On the eastern end, you've got Trossachs Pier. This is the main bustling hub where you'll find the visitor center, the steamship cafe, bike rentals, and these fantastic new eco-lodges right on the water. Then, way over on the far western end is Trossachs Pier. It's a much quieter, more laid-back terminal with a peaceful waterfront cafe and easy links to rural cycling paths. Now, while you're hanging around Trossachs Pier, you absolutely have to check out the Roderick Dhu Watchtower. Historically, Roderick Dhu was Rob Roy's accomplice, and he actually used this exact vantage point as an early warning system to spot incoming enemy troops. Today, they've built this striking, contemporary look out there. And what's really cool is the architects use scorched black timber, a nod to the Gaelic word dhu, which means black. So the structure just beautifully blends right into the wild hilltop, while giving you these insane panoramic views of Ben On and the loch itself. Next up, Section 4, Optimal Travel Itineraries, making the most of your time. So, if you're wondering how long you need here, a focused half day of about 3 to 4 hours is great. You can easily pair a 45-minute cruise on the Lady of the Lake with a moderate walk like the 4.5-mile Bernardshaw Trail. But if you really want to soak it all in, a full day of 6 to 8 hours is definitely the sweet spot. And honestly, if you book one of those eco-lodges by the pier, stretching it into a 2-day retreat is just an unforgettable experience. Which leads perfectly into my absolute highest recommendation for a full-day adventure, the Bike and Sail Challenge. It's so much fun. Step 1, you just rent a standard or electric bike right there at Trossachs Pier. Step 2, you load your bike right onto the 10:30 a.m. one-way cruise over to Trossachs. And Step 3, you cycle the 14 miles back. The best part? You're riding on this smooth, private tarmac road that hugs the northern edge of the water, and it's completely free from public car traffic. It is just spectacular. Getting there does take a little bit of logistical planning, though. The loch is about 24 miles from Stirling, which usually takes around 36 minutes by car. To get to the bustling Trossachs Pierside, you get to drive the famous Duke's Pass on the A821, which people often call one of Scotland's absolute best driving roads. To hit the quieter Trossachs side, you'll take the winding, single-track B829 from Aberfoyle. But here's the crucial thing to remember. You cannot drive your car along the shoreline between the two piers. It's just not possible. Finally, Section 5, Accessibility and Hidden Challenges. The honest truth. To make this explainer truly useful, we have to talk about the physical realities. This is a rugged Scottish landscape, so you need to know what you're getting into. There's a massive split in the terrain. The North Shore Road is fully paved. It's mostly flat with just a few gentle rolling hills, and it's exceptionally safe for families, strollers, and bikes. But the South Shore, it's a totally different story. We're talking pathless terrain, steep inclines, and sheer, dangerous cliffs. Doing a full walking loop around the entire loch is basically impossible for casual visitors. The constraints get even more real once you start looking for elevation. Sure, the immediate pier areas and that North Shore Road are super accessible, but the trails that actually give you those famous panoramic viewpoints, they're demanding. The Primrose Hills circular route has some really steep, rocky inclines, and the famous Ben Ann Trail right nearby is notoriously steep. Obviously, neither of those routes are going to be suitable for wheelchairs, strollers, or anyone dealing with mobility limitations. There are also a few practical things you really need to prepare for. If you're parking way out at the remote Trossachs Pier, bring cash because it is a strictly cash-only setup. Also, if you're feeling brave and want to try wild swimming, please take the warnings seriously. The water temperature here hovers around 4 degrees Celsius. The risk of severe cold water shock is incredibly high, so proper thermal gear and extreme caution are absolutely mandatory. So, what's the final verdict? Well, Loch Katrine is just an undeniable masterpiece. It's this rare place where wild, rugged Highland nature perfectly intersects with flawless Victorian engineering. Yes, it has some mobility challenges on the upper trails, and there are strict rules for being on the water, but its pristine condition and its massive historical significance make it an absolute must-see. Dedicating a solid day or two of focused exploration here is just incredibly rewarding. And that leaves us with this final thought to chew on. If a rogue outlaw's myth and a 19th century poem essentially invented the romantic tourism of Scotland's past, how will this pristine 64 million-liter lifeline, operating purely by gravity, shape the environmental and cultural future of the country? It's an incredible balancing act between romantic history and critical modern survival. Thanks for joining me for this explainer, and keep exploring.